So let's have a look at the weekly registration numbers on the last 10 weeks for China. You can see that Tesla is doing really great. They're poised to have a strong Q3, although I suspect that the competition will continue to increase, maybe even harsher now, especially since Xpeng launched their Xpeng Mona 3. So it's a very cheap car and seems to be receiving quite insane demand. The price is much cheaper than the Tesla Model 3. So I guess you could to some degree say it's a Model 3 killer to some degree. So yeah, Tesla is gonna have a really difficult time to sustain maybe these numbers as we go, in middle of, let's say, October and onwards. That's my suspicion, but let's wait and see. In addition to Tesla's more threats, we can see that Nio on the green bar, Nio's second brand, Onvo, which is a cheaper sub-brand, is going to launch their cars in late this month, so in just couple of or 3 weeks, and that car is gonna be cheaper than Model Y. But by the first reviews and the first kind of signals coming from the market, my suspicion is that Onvo's car L60 will be as well a really strong threat to Tesla's Model Y. So Model Y and Model 3 will definitely face more challenge from Xpeng and Nios. So essentially it's a tag team of Xpeng and Nio threatening Tesla sales. LiAuto is a bit more different. As we mentioned, they are working in some electric cars, but mostly it's plug-in hybrids. So it's maybe not apples to apples comparison, but anyways, I think it's interesting to have LiAuto in the graph as well, just to show that it's not only the pure electric cars that are selling well. As for Xpeng specifically, on the blue bar you can see that finally they breached the 3000 again. So essentially last time they did that was 10 weeks ago, and now they do it again. So I was beginning to get a bit worried for Xpeng at when we were at 18, 17, 1900. But with the new car, with the new sedan threatening Tesla's Model 3, I think maybe hopefully Xpeng will manage to stabilize around 3.5, maybe even 4000 for the next 10 weeks. Let's wait and see. But for Nio, my expectations actually is that as we go into, let's say a couple more weeks. So right now the numbers we got today are week 35. So week 36 and week 37 are gonna be mid to late September. And then the question begins, how will the last week of September look like? Maybe I'm hopeful that Nio will come in at 7,000 and above, maybe 7.5. That would be amazing to see, especially since my expectation that 3 weeks from now or 4 weeks at the latest, we should have the first delivery numbers for Nio's Onvo sub-brand. And that's gonna, maybe if we do the same exercise for Nio as we did for Xpeng, maybe Nio's average in the next 10 weeks will be, around 1,000 or 2,000 higher. I actually leave a room for the average to be 2,000 higher, because I think the demand should be out there, and if the average right now is still just below 5,000, maybe Nio would be coming at closer to 7,000 by the next 10 weeks. So that's hopeful for Nio's sales. We also know that if you go back to the stock price, you can see that Nio and Xpeng's market cap, they are not a whole lot. Xpeng is 1 billion less than Nio roughly, and both of them are combined less than LiAuto. I think this is a mismatch in a sense, so I believe that especially for Nio, there's much more potential given the fact that they are selling quite a bit of cars. If you look here, for example, at monthly deliveries, Nio right now is 15,000 ahead of Xpeng. Sure, they are 15,000 ahead of Xpeng, but they are almost 50,000, 60,000 behind LiAuto in Q3. LiAuto that is only 10,000 behind Tesla. So on the numbers, LiAuto are great, but remember that they are also selling PHEVs, so I don't think it's really apples to apples comparison. So looking at Nio and Xpeng, I think Nio should be more valuable, despite them having a rougher time reaching, let's say, sustainable gross margins due to the cost that is coming with the battery swap stations. We know that the swap stations are costly, and the required break-even point is 60 swaps per station, according to the CEO of a while back. We are roughly at 30, or let's say projected to reach to the high 30s by end of the year, which is good because we started the year by, let's say, 24 or 23 swaps per station. So if we end the year by 36, 37, I'm very happy. But speaking of that number, thank you for one of the comments in the section on my previous video as well. I should be more clear here that the 60 number, I think maybe we should take it with a pinch of salt, because they've had, previously given incentives to all their previous owners. I like this article from CNEV Post, for example. They actually say that Nio is going to tweak how it charges for their battery swap service in China. And this is gonna come on, the earnings date, which is September the 5th on Thursday. Remember, before the market opening, so I will cover that one as well. But yes, I really like this article here, because they also mention how this kind of incentive has changed. So there was a time where Nio essentially give you unlimited power swaps as many times as you wanted. Then they started to add some limits to it. For example, like I think in 2021 they scaled it back from 6 free swaps a month to like 4 or something like that. And then as time has gone by, they started to decrease the incentives. Obviously that's the same thing that Tesla did. If you remember, in 2015, 16, 17, they used to sell a few cars where people could charge unlimited. And actually today, if you buy a Model S from, I believe 2016 or 17, some variants of those, if you go buy one of those, on the market, you are technically able to get the free charging as well, following with the car. So this, as you said, buy the new car, it follows with the sales process. I don't know how that works for Nio, but I think this is, good for Nio. And my hope is that they start to, charge relatively a bit more, because if we see that people are adopting the battery swap charging, I think Nio should be able to make some more money on it. These are, advantages that we have compared to the other electric cars. For example, I'm driving a Model 3, and sure, the charging is very, easy and there's no issues at all, but there are times where you have to stay in line, and there are times where even if once you stay in line and then you get your spot to charge the car, there's still, so many cars there, so the speed at which the charger is charging up your car is not that, the highest peak possible limit. So that there's that. And then there's, for example, in Sweden or in Norway, it's very cold in the winter. And then you'll see that it's really difficult to charge up the battery, especially if you haven't, warmed up the battery before, preconditioned the battery. So there's really added value to Nio cars, especially in winter time. Hence, I think they should be able to charge this down the road a bit more. So there's that for Nio, but remember that the earnings is gonna come on Thursday before market open. And I've been, essentially looking at a couple of numbers here. The gross margin is very important. Why do I think there's gonna be a jump from, let's say, just below 5% in Q1 to 12% maybe? I think 12%, it's possible. I would say it's 25 to 35% chance that it's 12%. Most realistic number is maybe 10, but let's hope for 12. Reason why I kind of went almost or more than double the previous quarter's gross margin, well, we essentially doubled the number of sales. We also know that in Q1, they had to give people a lot of incentives to clear out the previous model year cars. So I think the average selling price is possibly higher on Q2 numbers. So not only did we sell almost 2 times the amount of car, the average selling price is up. We also know that the lithium carbonate price is just been on a downward trend over the past year. So the more time goes on and the more the price is lower, the more we will see the effect of the gross margin improving for Nio. So there's a whole lot of different reasons why the gross margin should improve. Then there's the earnings report for Xpeng and Zeekr, which is part of Geely's car sub-brand. We saw that their gross margin also improved quite a bit, and in some cases, I don't remember exactly, but they were like well above 12%. And most importantly, for example, for Xpeng, there was not a long time ago where they had a negative gross margin. I think it was in Q2 or Q3 last year, and now they had like 14 or 15% gross margin. So that's why I think it's gonna improve. Also, if you look at Q3 of 2023, which is essentially same number of cars delivered, granted that the average selling price should be much higher in Q3 last year, Still, this doesn't take into account that Nios should have better, cost structure right now than they did back then. So I think, it's a challenge to get better gross margin in Q3 last year. They had at that time they had around 8%. But I think it's possible because the numbers of we saw from Xpeng and Zeekr. So let's wait see for Thursday numbers. But I think this is gonna. Let's pray that this is the time that Xpeng, Nio, and all these automotive car stocks kind of start to get some momentum, because I do think that most of them are really undervalued. Maybe not in the case of Tesla. I don't think Tesla is overvalued necessarily, but maybe the future kind of numbers that I could see in 2020 and 2021 is not realistic anymore at this stage, unless they achieve the full self-driving and all this robotics that they are working with. But I don't think that's in the near future, especially not the FSD. I'm highly skeptical of FSD, and I've been that way for the past 8 years. I think definitely at some point, and I do believe Tesla is in the lead, but maybe not for the next year or 2 years. Let's wait and see. But for Tesla also, the other big issue is, sure, they gain also on the fact that the lithium carbonate price is kind of going down. They gain on, compared to the others, on the number of cars that they are selling. They got the higher volume manufacturing, so there's more efficiencies to be had at the higher volumes. But I think one of charts that kind of visualizes why I think Tesla's position, at least on this pure car selling kind of business, is gonna be more threatened, and they're gonna need to fight harder in order to retain their margins. Remember, Model S and X are not selling as much as they used to do as percentage of Tesla's sales, and going forwards, I don't expect Model S and X to sell much more than they already do now, and those are the two high margin cars for Tesla. And look at 2020 through 2023 and expected 2024. So you can see that LiAuto is the orange one, growing like really fast. Xpeng is, although not gaining market share compared to, let's say, 2020 on a rough basis, they projected to at least till 2023 4, 5, 6 times their sales, but not gaining market share, whereas LiAuto 10x their sales, so they gain a bit of market share. For Nio, also kind of holding steady on their market share, but I expect that both Xpeng and Nio will gain market share in 2025 because they're more competitive in the lower price range, especially Nio. But anyways, look at Tesla, the dark green one, and you can see until 2023 they're essentially below 50% market share if you compare only to these 4 car manufacturers. So whereas in 2020 they had over 70% market share. And then, this doesn't include all the American or German or European manufacturers and a host of other different Chinese manufacturers like Xiaomi and others. So I think for Tesla, although I see better, numbers for Nio and Xpeng, I don't necessarily see, a whole lot of improvement for Tesla. And in fact, these numbers here that you can see, Tesla 2.1 million cars sold in 2024. I've been talking about this. I don't change it just for the sake of transparency. But over the past 6 months, I think it's been highly realistic to assume this number is not achievable for Tesla at this stage. The more realistic number is at best 1.9 million cars as of right now. But anyway, so that's why I don't think Tesla is necessarily the best investment here. And also remember that despite all the lithium carbonate price and efficiencies of the larger number of production, it's there for Tesla. But the valuation is also so much higher. Like Tesla is essentially close to 100 times the size of Xpeng or Nio. Not really 100 times, maybe 80 times. But they're valued 80 times more than Nio and Xpeng on a rough basis. But they are selling what? So if you compare to Nio, for example, so let's look at the numbers of cars sold in, let's have a look here, monthly deliveries and year to date. So in China, year to date, Tesla is at 316,000 cars, Nio has 128. And going onwards, I promise you that by end of the year, the gap will decrease a bit more. So let's say by end of the year or at latest end of next year, Nio will sell 50% of Tesla's sales in China. Sure, Tesla sells a lot of cars in Europe and in America as well, but let's say if you add to those numbers additionally 1.5 more million cars in Tesla, still that's not 80 times. So essentially the difference in market cap. So that's why I think it's danger to, look at Tesla as a cheap value, but they got so many different segments for them going on, and it's an American company, the market values that more, so I don't know. But anyways, that's maybe a short or actually a more longer update on the weekly delivery numbers, and stay tuned for Nios earnings. And yeah, thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe, and see you in the next one.